In the quiet prairies of Canada, something is stirring. Alberta and Saskatchewan, two provinces long known for their economic strength, resource wealth, and independent spirit, are now at the center of a storm that could change the face of Canada forever. Is this the beginning of the end for Canadian unity? Are these provinces finally ready to break free? Today, we dive into the truth, the lies, and the whispers coming out of Western Canada, and why 2026 could be the year everything changes. Let's go back. Long before Danielle Smith, long before Trudeau, even before Pierre Trudeau's National Energy Program, Alberta and Saskatchewan felt like outliers. They provided the energy that powered Canada. They fed the nation with grain, cattle, and oil. And yet, the policies? The money? The decisions? They came from Ottawa, from Toronto, from Montreal. And that resentment has never gone away. When Danielle Smith recently proposed lowering the threshold for a separation vote in Alberta, it wasn't just a political move, it was a signal. A signal that Alberta might finally be done playing nice. So let's talk about 2026. Behind closed doors, insiders say the Alberta government is preparing a blueprint, quietly, methodically, for a referendum that could ask the unthinkable. Should Alberta begin negotiations to leave Canada? Danielle Smith hasn't confirmed it. Not fully, but multiple provincial malays are already calling 2026 Independence Year. In Saskatchewan, Premier Scott Moe hasn't gone as far, but recent documents suggest he's keeping his options open. One source claimed Saskatchewan has quietly formed a sovereignty committee to study the Alberta model. Officially, they deny it. But here's what we do know. Both provinces are now considering a parallel framework to manage pensions, police, and even trade without Ottawa. So why now? Because Ottawa is tightening the screws. Carbon taxes, pipeline cancellations, fertilizer restrictions, and now a rumored Federal Energy Transition Act that would see oil and gas phased out by 2035. For many in the West, that's not a transition, it's a death sentence. The Liberals say they're saving the environment. Alberta and Saskatchewan say Ottawa is killing their future. And it's not just rhetoric anymore. Saskatchewan followed 2 weeks later. It was a warning shot. Now here's where it gets strange. U.S. President Donald Trump recently made headlines when he joked about Canada being up for sale. But what didn't make the headlines? A leaked internal poll from a U.S. think tank showed 53% of American Republicans would support a strategic alliance with Alberta and Saskatchewan. Two unnamed U.S. senators, both from energy-rich states, allegedly met with Alberta ministers in Calgary in early 2025. Officials deny it ever happened. But 3 eyewitnesses claim to have seen black SUVs, DC plates, and full security escort. But this isn't a one-sided story. Indigenous leaders across Western Canada have issued strong warnings. Any move toward independence would be a direct violation of historic treaties. Many First Nations leaders say they would not recognize a breakaway Alberta or Saskatchewan unless new agreements were signed. Some even suggest they would appeal to the United Nations to intervene. And in a surprise twist, a coalition of over 20 Indigenous groups announced a Treaty Nation Summit scheduled for fall 2025 to discuss a future where they may negotiate directly with foreign nations, not Ottawa or the provinces. Let's follow the money. Alberta contributes billions more to the federal government than it receives. Saskatchewan too, though smaller in scale. Combined, they could fund their own military, healthcare, and pension system, at least on paper. But critics warn, leaving Canada would mean massive disruptions. Currency chaos, border disputes, trade nightmares. And yet, an Alberta-based economic report commissioned quietly by an unknown third party suggested that a breakaway Western alliance, Westcan, could be self-sustaining within 10 years, with a GDP exceeding that of New Zealand. Now let's talk about the people on the ground. The Wexit movement is no longer fringe. Sure, it's still a minority, but it's growing fast. In 2024, only 20% of Albertans supported separation. By early 2025, 33%. In Saskatchewan, 27%. And in private online groups, some with over 100,000 members, talk of independence has turned into planning. Here's what nobody in Ottawa wants to admit. If Alberta leaves, Saskatchewan might follow. If they both leave, Manitoba could be next. And British Columbia? Don't rule it out. An internal government memo, leaked just weeks ago, warned of a cascading fracture event that could unravel Canadian federalism within 24 months. It's not public. Not yet. But we've seen enough to know this. Here's something you probably haven't seen on CBC or Global. Alberta's internal strategy documents, released briefly on a government portal before being pulled, outlined a plan called Project Prairie Voice. It was designed to create a separate, province-funded media network to counterbalance Eastern bias and prepare Western Canadians for narrative sovereignty. Yes, narrative sovereignty. It would include new TV channels, independent newspapers, and podcasts backed quietly by provincial grants. The federal government responded swiftly. A confidential letter from Heritage Canada warned that provincial media structures could be in violation of national broadcasting regulations. But Alberta pushed forward. The website for Prairie Voice Media was online for just 17 minutes before being taken down. Why? Some insiders believe Ottawa demanded it. Others think it was a test, and Alberta passed. A province can build its own media muscle. And soon, it might. Multiple flight logs show a private jet arriving in Edmonton in March 2025. It was registered to a Dubai-based energy conglomerate, a known intermediary for Saudi Aramco. Within 24 hours, top officials from Alberta's energy ministry were seen entering a secured building downtown. What followed? Total silence. But then, just weeks later, an Alberta-based oil firm with close ties to the provincial government announced a massive exploratory partnership in the Middle East. Was this about business? Or was it something bigger? A quiet assurance that a post-Canada Alberta would have international buyers ready no matter what Ottawa says. If true, that means Alberta isn't just planning for separation. They're pre-building foreign alliances. Alberta might lead the headlines, but Saskatchewan? It's planting something else entirely. A new bill passed quietly in the legislature, Bill 184, grants the province sweeping control over agricultural exports, tariffs, and land use regulations. Translation: Saskatchewan can now negotiate export deals directly with foreign buyers, bypassing Ottawa's agriculture ministry. And they're already doing it. A leaked email from a provincial trade rep revealed a proposed agreement with India to ship grain through the U.S., not Vancouver. And there's more. Saskatchewan government just allocated $450 million to upgrade southern trade rail lines, including one that terminates just 2 kilometers from the U.S. border. This isn't about infrastructure. It's about autonomy. Quietly, methodically, Saskatchewan is laying tracks, not just for trade, but for independence. But wait, before we think this is a done deal, there's one last bridge. A group of MPs from Western Liberal and NDP ridings, many in urban centers, have formed a new bipartisan coalition, Canada Together. They argue that separation will devastate Indigenous communities, isolate Western universities, and collapse regional healthcare systems. Their proposal? An emergency federal-provincial summit, summer 2025, to renegotiate the Confederation Agreement for the West. Danielle Smith hasn't commented. Scott Moe declined the invitation. But behind the scenes, pressure is building. Some believe it's already too late. Others believe it's the only chance to hold the country together. Either way, the clock is ticking. So here we are. A nation on the edge. 2 provinces rising, a people divided, and a question that will define the next generation. Will Alberta and Saskatchewan finally break free? Or will Canada hold together one last time? Stay tuned. The story isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning.